Steven Universe and all associated images are property of Cartoon Network, Rebecca Sugar, and any and all other respective owners. I don't know them all. All footage in this video has been used for the purpose of critique parody under fair use. Please support the official release. Man, I really love the music in Steven Universe. It's really good. Even the stuff that isn't being sung by a character, that isn't specific to a character. Like I'm a Star, for example, or stuff that doesn't really affect the plot, like a comet, for example. Tends to be really good and have a good theme behind it and have a lot of thought put into it. Which is why it's so interesting to me that these two particular songs are almost identical. Okay, not literally, obviously, but thematically, they're pretty freaking close. Greg's song, Like a Comet, is all about how he likens his life to a comet crashing to Earth. The impact that he makes comes from his music. He will rise and fall, he will succeed or he will fail through his efforts as a musician. His music will prove who he is and what he can accomplish. Likewise, I'm a Star is all about how the singer feels validated. They have come to know many, many people through their career. That's a big part of their life, that being a star and having so many connections because of it makes them feel worthwhile. Both songs have a space theme, and both are about self-worth derived through talent. Obviously, these aren't the only interpretations of the lyrics of those songs, but going by these particular interpretations, there's an obvious parallel. It even makes me wonder if the girl who sings I'm a Star, or maybe the person who wrote it for her, assuming that she didn't write it for herself, was a fan of Greg's music at some point in the past. Of course, me being me and my mind working the way it does, noticing these parallels got me thinking. Are there any more parallels that seem to draw from these songs? Let's look at the character of Sadie, for example. She seems to identify very heavily with this song. She seems to really enjoy it, at least, and as far as we know, it's the only song that she was willing to even consider singing in front of other people. Maybe there's a parallel between her and Greg somewhere? I mean, obviously it's not a perfect parallel, because she didn't write the song and she didn't perform it, but it's not so flimsy a parallel that I would just ignore it. This is really interesting to me because of another parallel that I've been noticing lately, that being the parallel between Lars and Rose. I've been wondering for a long time if there was ever going to be some in-universe connection between Lars and Rose. There was a line all the way back in Lars and the Cool Kids that implied that Lars knew Rose, or at least knew of Rose. And ever since then I've been wondering if there was going to be a follow-up to that, but recently, between Off Colors and Lars's head, and the recent preview we've gotten for Season 5, showing that Lars becomes a literal rebel against Homeworld, has made it pretty clear that Lars is supposed to be a Rose parallel in and of himself. He's even pink now. It's reaching a point where you can't deny it. It even makes a lot of sense if you look at their histories. Granted, Lars is not a soldier in an alien army, which oppresses other planets, who rose up against her own people and her own government, and later felt guilty for all the horrible things that she did, even though she herself was oppressed and forced to do those things. But Lars has been portrayed as someone who feels like his life isn't under his own control, like he can never do what he wants to do, or achieve what he wants to achieve. Like the place that he is in now, or has been up to this point at least, isn't where he belongs. He feels like life and his own circumstances are holding him back. And he's also very concerned with his own image, trying to figure out who he is and who he wants to be going forward. Something which I'm sure Rose had to decide at the time of choosing to rebel. And he is in a romantic relationship with someone who may be a Greg parallel. Now he's becoming involved in his own rebellion, one which seems to help him to discover who he actually wants to be and bring out the best of who he is. Rose would have gone through something very similar after rebelling and realizing that she was free. She could do whatever she wanted. Rebellion for both of them is a time for self-discovery, which means that Lars's rebellion, which we will see some of in upcoming episodes, may actually allude to things that happened at the start of Rose's rebellion, which is something that we're never getting a chance to see because the show is from Steven's perspective, and he can't possibly be there. Which actually raises an interesting question. If Lars, at this point in his life, is supposed to be an XP for Rose at the point of rebellion, then how can Sadie be a Greg parallel? Rose didn't know Greg yet. Back then, her romantic interest, I guess you would call it, was Pearl, a gem who was influenced by Rose into rebelling as well, and who likewise probably had some influence on Rose's choice to rebel in the first place, just as how Sadie has had influence in how Lars has developed up to this point. It would make more sense in this analogy if Sadie is a Pearl parallel. And it actually still works. In fact, it works even better this way. Pearl found real friendship and happiness via her actions as a crystal gem. She also found a freedom to be whoever she wanted. Those are some pretty strong parallels to the themes in I'm a Star. But if Sadie is a Pearl parallel and Lars is a Rose parallel, that means they're not going to end up together, and that kind of bums me out. In fact, if we were to trace this parallel to its furthest conclusion, it would suggest that Lars isn't even going to end up with a human. That he, being a human, is going to end up with a gem, the opposite to what happened with Rose and Greg. But that's just ridiculous speculativeness at this point. I cannot back that up with evidence, even slightly. So let's just let's move on from that. I guess the conclusion to this big, messy stream of consciousness would be that I think Rebekah Sugar and the rest of the Crewniverse is using Lars and Sadie's relationship as a metaphor for what Rose and Pearl's relationship was like at the beginning of the rebellion, because it's something that we're never going to be able to see for ourselves. I also think it may mean that Lars and Sadie aren't supposed to end up together. But who knows? It's also possible that Lars and Sadie's relationship will be used to show us what may have happened if Rose and Pearl had ended up together. There's literally no way to know. I guess we'll just have to keep watching the show then, in the hopes of one day finding out. In the meantime though, guys, what did you think of this theory? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.